Play tonight. All right. Thank you all for being here for the final Policy and Equity Committee meeting of the year. We'll save our tears for the end. It's been an awesome year, as we have every other time. We'll begin with a quick round of introductions, beginning with the man behind the curtain.
Rob Wilson, technician.
Davis, the board's administrative assistant.
Mary Weinberg, board member.
Mike Morosky, board member.
Good morning, Derek Little, Chief of Staff.
Dan Hoying, General Counsel.
Stephanie Scott, Assistant General Counsel. Emily Bell, ASME Local 232. Kathy Craig, Officer General.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you all again for being so amenable to moving the start time 45 minutes so I could go to donuts with Dad at my son's school at Hayes Porter in the West End. It was an awesome morning, and we had good donuts and a lot of fun. And I also got to take part in the Mission to Move exercises, and I got to shake my tail feathers, literally, with my son, and it was wonderful. And there are pictures that will appear somewhere at some point of shaking my tail feather on the preschool carpet. All right, so I don't think my weekend is only downhill from here. So we're going to dive right into the agenda. Our colleague, Miss Eve Bolton, is also a member of this committee, and unfortunately is not here today. But we love her, and I wanted to give her a shout out and thank her for all her efforts on this committee. So we're just going to dive right in. First, we're going to have a continued discussion of Policy 6152, student fees, fines, and charges. There's not a ton, honestly, I don't think to talk about. I could be wrong. This is on the agenda because we said we would just continue to keep bringing it up as the board figures out what we want to do, all 7 of us, regarding fees and fines and charges, i.e., do we get rid of all of them? Do we get rid of some of them? The superintendent, will recall at the full board meeting where we discussed this, offered up, hey, what if we just waive that sort of state base fee, which is the tune of about $1 million, which the board said that sounds great. So that's one step. So I just left this here. I know Ms. Bolton wanted to leave it on the agenda. I don't have much to add. I'm going to first see if Council's office has anything new to add, or Doc Little, do you have anything new to add?
Nope.
Okay.
I think that's the superintendent's recommendation, is to start there.
Great.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't have anything else to add. I just look forward to hearing what the rest of our colleagues, what they think after the superintendent makes her recommendation.
Good. Check. Wow. So chronic absenteeism, I put this on here, and it's funny, I on the agenda like a month ago before chronic absenteeism came up, and then it came up again. TERS report, for those who remember, with that AI software, and that caused some consternation and discussion, which I thought was healthy and good, about what is the assurance of this AI software protecting our students' identity and privacy. But that's not why this is on here. I put this on here for the very simple reason I've spoken to the superintendent, I've spoken to Mr. Hoying, and so just speaking to everybody, I put this on here because, as y'all have heard me say before, when we talk about, or when I think about, I should say, the social determinants of education, this is the one that maybe has the biggest impact, but also is the largest out of our control. There are so many things that contribute to absenteeism, chronic or otherwise. And so I asked if this would be on here. My hope was, and I'm looking to Doc Little, I'm looking to the superintendent, I'm looking to experts, of which I am not one. I have some ideas, but I'm not an expert. What I would like to pose to the administration going into next year, I don't know who will be on policy. I don't know who will be chairing policy. I've chaired it for 4 years, and I've been grateful for that. I don't know if I'll even be on the committee next year, but for the committee's work next year, it seems to me, particularly coming out of COVID, this is the issue. And obviously, it seems obvious, but if kids aren't in school, they're not going to learn. It's kind of like in my work with homelessness. People say, what's the best way to solve homelessness, Mike? And I say, give people homes. And they laugh, and I go, I'm not kidding. It's the same thing. What's the best way to get kids to learn? Make sure they're in school. Because we know once we got them, they're going to be okay. And so my question, I guess, and we're not going to solve this today, but to the administration or challenge, that sounds tough kind, I don't mean it to. Is there a way through policy to bolster and support what y'all do every day? what the superintendent's efforts will be next year, what the teachers we're opening up negotiations with AFSCME and teachers and everybody next year. Are there ways through those contracts to solve this? And then back it up one step further to us, is there something we can do here that would help that process via contract? And again, I don't know, so that's why I put it on here. And I don't know if you want, I know you came with some, so I'll turn it over if it's okay, Doc. You got it.
Yeah, really appreciate this topic being discussed. It is of huge importance to us as an organization, and as you've heard the superintendent say, she was quite sort of frustrated last year that she couldn't harp on this as much as we wanted to because of the transportation challenges, and that clearly is a top priority for us this year. As much, but not all, of those transportation challenges have been addressed. I'll give you some insight. I think the direct answer to your question is probably a maybe. I think that's worth future conversation to see if there actually is policy action that's needed, or if it continues to be non-policy actions, but something that is top of the agenda for the district and the community. A couple of things just to share that are underway, though. We know coming into this school year that we added attendant social workers at those high schools to really focus on really extreme chronic absenteeism at the high school level. That work thus far is going well. We've also, with all of our social workers, really intentionally shifted focus over the summer for just looking at headline attendance, like how many students in daily attendance are showing up, to chronic absenteeism specifically. It's really easy if we only focus on basic attendance to miss the forest for the trees with chronic absenteeism. So the work that our social workers do in partnership with Children's Hospital has shifted focus to look at that specifically, and that's where they're taking action. That's who they're deciding to do home visits with. That's who we're really leading work around attendance intervention plans on. And are seeing promising good results, as we shared in the last Goals and Guardrails update, where Q1 is looking good by comparison overall. The other thing, and I heard you mention this, Board Member Morosky, at the board meeting when this came up, is we're also in conversations with community partners. The Children's Hospital is very interested in, as a whole set of stakeholders involved in discussions around, obviously, health equity, but showing up to doctor's visits is just as much a challenge to them as children showing up to school. So there is synergy and shared interest here in trying to figure out how collectively we can work on this. Similarly with the city, students who are out on the streets during the day are more likely to be involved in some sort of ruckus or issue. And so they have interest from a safety perspective in ensuring students are in school. So there are a lot of conversations citywide where this is a continual topic in shared interest. And so the reason why I say maybe or possibly is because I think those conversations are developing and trying to crystallize on potential actions and solutions. So as that continues and we continue our discussions internally, I think there could be more potentially to put on paper to learn. Happy to talk about the all here thing if we want to this morning as needed. Really would just like people to understand that's another layer into our work, not the work.
I appreciate your offer for that, but I'm going to say that's okay. Thank you, though. We don't need that. I really love the way you framed all this, though, and I think we're absolutely on the same page. I'm going to see, obviously, if Mrs. Weinberg wants to say something after. I know Dan has Mr. Holling has the truancy policy up here for folks at home if you want to see it. I don't really, it's kind of cut and dry. But the only fine point I do want to make in this, and I should have said it before, and I apologize that I didn't, is at least my intention, and again, not dumb enough to speak for my colleagues, but I feel it's probably their intention as well, is when I do have this on here, I am absolutely not looking to create some sort of punitive measures via policy for this. So just to make that clear, that the idea is if there's a way to bolster all of these things that we're talking about via policy from our level, that helps you all say, hey, look, you have to do this because these people told us we have to. So that's the deal. So did you want to say anything, Mr. Holling?
I just wanted to say a word. Actually, I'm glad you brought up that that the direction isn't punitive. And just a word about the history of this specific policy that Rob has up there now. Prior to 2016-17, there were Ohio Revised Code requirements for school districts who had students or families not attending school to report them to the juvenile court. And this created this massive backlog of criminal cases, really criminal cases, that the courts didn't know how to deal with, that were introducing families and children to the criminal justice system in a way that was unproductive. And so in 1718, you might remember the Ohio the Ohio General Assembly passed House Bill 410, and that sort of changed everything with respect to how schools now, instead of referring to court, in the first instance at least, have a whole attendance intervention process at the school level, and so that's been fully implemented at CPS and frankly around the state. So, yeah.
Yeah, if I could add two quick things to that. We are all on the same page that this isn't meant to be punitive. Working with the local courts, we have two diversionary courts at Aiken and at CDAM Virtual. We are quite happy with them. The courts are quite happy with them. We are in conversations to consider if those can expand to other places as well. The other thing I should have mentioned is ODE probably 3 weeks ago released sort of a blueprint and a white paper on chronic absenteeism. CPS had representation on that task force to help inform what that looks like. And so you're asking the direct policy question here. I would also flag that I think there's potential legislative advocacy work to be done in the next cycle, because that blueprint really was teeing up potential revisions to House Bill 410 to make this less reactive for districts and more proactive on the front end.
That's awesome news. Thank you. This is great updates. I just learned at least 6 new things. Thank you. Mrs. Weinberg?
I don't have anything to add except for the fact that.
Yeah, great. And so, Ms. Davis, regardless of who's sitting here in this seat in January, let's keep this on the agenda for sure, and just keep talking. And again, I'll speak for myself as chair. I can't speak for the next chair, whoever that may be, but I don't particularly care one way or the other if it does result in a policy. I just want to make sure that we can be helpful if it does. So, great. Renaming Lighthouse. Yeah, it just keeps coming back. This is probably quick too. We don't have an answer like, it should be called Stephanie Scott School. I actually kind of like that. The 3 Stephanie Scott's. All in favor. All right, moving on. So we need to do this. And I don't know, Mrs. Weinberg, I want to see if you have any thoughts. I mean, I have no offer of names or anything, but I think we really need to get in the community and start doing this.
I would agree. We definitely need to do this. I don't want another year to go by.
It's been a year. Yeah.
Yes. And so definitely whatever the process or the steps that are needed, I think we need to go ahead and get started with that so that we can kind of close with it.
And so, yeah, we can put like an action item in the minutes, I think, Ms. Davis, that would, administration would begin the process, in the community of renaming Lighthouse. And this is not just to repeat again, like pressing has to happen now. It's just, I think more of it when Mrs. Weinberg reminded me, she's like, did we ever do that? I'm like, no, we didn't. And then Bramble happened, and then we didn't. We just had, Lighthouse is not upset with us. Nobody's upset with us, but we should have done this 2 years ago. Yes, Mrs. Weinberg.
And I just want to add, I know that you mentioned about, the process of going into the community and getting all of that. I just want to make sure, though, that when we make that as an action item, that we are including the school, well, not only the community, but anybody else that's on the list that we're supposed to ask. I just want to make sure that we're doing that, so that when it comes back to us, we can have it all.
Yep.
We don't have to say that we have to go back out to get something else.
Yeah.
So.
Which one?
Yeah. Does the board have any, or do you know whether the board has any? I know Board Member Bolton mentioned Odell Owens as one possible.
Right.
If there are other, names that the board would be interested in sort of floating as we have those discussions with the community, it might be worthwhile to know.
Okay. I think, yeah, we can maybe even for a increase in updates at our next board meeting, if one of us remembers to just ask folks and tell them to email Dan. Or I would say, yeah, the Dr. Owens one resonates with me, particularly because, the students for whom Lighthouse was sort of designed are students with whom Dr. Owens worked and advocated for his entire life. So it makes sense to me too. Great. Proposed policies. So these were the gifts, grants, and bequests, 7230 and 7230.02, crowdsourcing. So I believe the crowdsourcing one is new. Are they both? And they're both new.
They're actually both new.
Yeah, they're both new. I thought, okay, the gifts one is too. All right, go ahead, Mr. Wang.
So it started with the crowdsourcing. It's been about 2 or 3 years that the Ohio auditor has recommended that school districts adopt a policy that relates to crowdsourcing. When we talk about crowdsourcing, I think in schools, we're mostly talking about sort of classroom-based fundraising that is going on through there are now websites that facilitate these sort of efforts. Adopt a Class, maybe GoFundMe, but Donors Choose is one that I think is widely used. We watched as school districts kind of around the state took a variety of positions with respect crowdsourcing in classrooms. Dayton, this policy looked at a policy that Dayton had passed at one point that said, no crowdsourcing whatsoever, that there will be none, versus other school districts that were widely supportive of crowdsourcing efforts. I think everything has kind of come to the mean, and there's been I think now a little bit more uniformity in what school districts, there's a few issues that I think a policy should address, among others, in crowdsourcing. Who does that, if there are funds raised to purchase something for the class, who does that property belong to? So if Mrs. Jones raises enough money to buy, let's say, a smart board for her class, and then Mrs. Jones leaves for Princeton next year, another school district, does she take that smart board with her? Does that become the property of the school? Also, is that smart board able to be integrated with our other technology in the school? And so these kind of questions. But and finally, the issue that I think is also important is a reputational one. These campaigns for donations can sometimes suggest, I don't have enough resources for my school, from my district, and that, you know, again, sometimes those claims, I think, can be exaggerated, sometimes maybe, but there's a reputational impact to these campaigns as well. So with that in mind, we started looking around the state at other policies. This one is very close to Columbus, but as we were looking at that, Columbus's policy also referenced a gifts, grants, and bequests policy, which it sort of referred to internally. We didn't have that policy either, and in talking to the treasurer, working with their office, it seemed to make sense to us to also include and recommend a policy related to gifts, grants, and bequests. So those are the two policies that we're recommending. These have also been presented to the Finance Committee, and they've looked at them last month, and per the treasurer, I understand they're going to look at them again today. So these likely, wanted to share them with this committee. If you have any feedback or questions for us, glad to answer them. But otherwise, I would expect that in January, we'll be getting these from the Finance Committee as a recommendation to move forward. So.
Great. Mrs. Wamba, go ahead.
Yes, so I have a couple of questions. Obviously, being a past teacher within the district and someone who I applied for a couple of these grants. My only concern is when I'm looking at number 4, where it says the school retains property ownership of any item received. I just have a question regarding some of the campaigns when you fill out the application and it states, who is it going towards or what type of plans do you have. Some of it says that it can stay with the teacher because it's not primarily for particular necessarily students. It could be something that the teacher has done or particular certification that the teacher has. How will you take that into consideration? So teacher A, for example, she's Orton Gillingham certified, blah, 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 and she's applying for a type of funding based off of that. It's not necessarily based off of her students, but it's based off of her certification of what she has. So whatever she receives, that is to go with her wherever she travels, as long as she's teaching that particular subject. So why would it be the property of the school? That would be my only thing. And I know that I had various conversations with teachers throughout the year about this, where I get what you're trying to do, but also I think in some aspect it may interfere with some other things that might occur. So I don't know if there's a special, opportunity where maybe the principal can oversight that to say, well, this is what this particularly says. I will state that I'll sign off on it, and it is the teacher's property whatsoever.
So certainly value your feedback as a teacher too. You have a unique perspective on this that I'm glad to get. I think I don't know that we'd thought through that completely. I will say I think it's a little bit difficult depending on how the fundraising is done. If that teacher is fundraising from sort of her school's families, her class's families, I get that it may relate specifically to her licensure, his licensure, or that teacher's practice, but also if the money is being raised sort of using CPS families, there may, on the donor side, be sort of an expectation that it remain with the school. So I don't know.
Right. And
it's a good question.
The reason why I asked you that is because in the particular grant that I received, it was from someone in New York,
Sure.
and it wasn't geared towards my students. It was geared towards something that I had, certification I had. So it didn't need to stay with the school because obviously I then moved on to another school. So I was able to take those items with me because I was still teaching the particular subject. So I just want you to.
I think it's good feedback and something for us to think about. And maybe, when this comes up for a vote for the policy committee, we'll be prepared to answer that as well. Thank you.
And I just basically informed my principal. I said, these are the items that I still have, and this is where I will be taking it. Obviously, just to work with the children, but they were okay with that.
Appreciate the feedback.
I think it's just communication.
I think so too.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg. Certainly something I wouldn't have thought of, so I appreciate it too. I don't have any other comments on them. Look forward to seeing what finance says. And thank you, Ms. Scott and Mr. Hoying, for bringing this to us. Other business. Wow, I told you. How about them? So if anybody who's watching, any of you two folks out there, whoever you may be, assuming you're not watching because someone told you you had to and you want to speak and say something, feel free to raise your hand and tell us who you are and what school you represent. Real quick, though, for Miss Davis, now I'm going to get to Mrs. Weinberg. Also for the January agenda, we'll put policy committee scope of work. I'll just take care of all this stuff now just in case I'm not the guy, so that make it easy on the new person if there's one. So we'll put that on there. And we'll have Lighthouse back on there just in case. We're going to put these past two, the gifts, grants, bequests, and crowdsourcing on there. We'll need those again. Get finances feedback. And I am finished for now, and I'm going to kick it to Mrs. Weinberg for other business.
I will be really quick. And I had mentioned this to you. Dan, I just sent you an email. I wanted to kind of briefly just chat about the students who wanted that resolution to commit to renewable energy and electrification. So I didn't know if this is something that we need to do here or to obviously discuss. But I'm going to bring it back over to you so that you can make some comments on it as well.
Well, I think anybody who's been around for a minute knows I support this. I've tried to get a couple of different climate things passed, and they haven't, and that's okay. I still maintain, I put this on for board matters for our next board meeting. I still maintain that this would be a good thing to talk with everybody and see if we get the board's buy-in before we do something in policy, because the resolution says that we would commit to it. If we decide to commit to it, then we will ostensibly need policies at some point to encourage and support the administration's move to, renewable energy. So I think the board needs to talk about it first, so to see if they want to do it, right? That would be my recommendation.
That's fine. I just wanted to make Dan aware as well. And
I appreciate that.
With you, I support it.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinberg.
Yeah. I know Ms. Weinberg was up at OSBA this week, and there was a big push on electric school buses. They had one pulled right into the hall, actually. Yeah. So
save money, increase student achievement, or help try to save the planet that's already doomed. That's my rosy outlook on things. But hey, do our best, right? At least we tried. So that would be, it would be good to get everyone's feedback on that. And then, wow, this is wild. So with the world's fastest policy meeting coming to a close. Does anyone want to say anything? Do we have someone that wants to speak? Okay, well then we will get to that person and then we will close. Great.
Hi,
All right.
Kathy. Go ahead and unmute your camera and microphone.
We have 2 minutes. Hello.
Hi, my name's Kathy, and I'm the chair of the LSDMC at Walnut. And we had a question that was brought to us at our last meeting regarding students staying after school, kind of waiting to be picked up, or potentially waiting for athletics to start, or various things. And the question was asked if there was a policy for students after school on school property.
Mr. Wang? And yeah, it's since a little more informal than the board meeting, I think we're going to respond to that.
Maybe, although we might need more clarification. The code of conduct certainly applies and continues to apply on school property. Is that, I'm not sure the question necessarily.
Yeah, so right now, our policy at Walnut is to be off school property at 3:15 unless you are engaged in some type of school activity. We have kind of noticed that there are students that are, we'll say, hanging around on school property, and we discussed a variety of reasons on why that might be, whether it's waiting for an athletics or a club or something to start after school, and not wanting to go home and then come back to school. With the change in the metro system, there does not seem to be a urgency to move down to the bus stops to get their bus, because buses are consistently coming. So there does seem to be a little bit of kind of hanging out after school before they go to get on the bus with some groups. And then potentially waiting for rides from parents to be picked up. And so I guess the question that Walnut had, or we had a safety committee that came to that presented at our LSDMC meeting that was asking kind of what other schools are doing regarding after school, and whether or not we needed to be in line with those other schools, or if it's kind of up to each school to kind of figure out these situations.
Yeah, thanks very much for your question. There is no kind of district-wide policy that relates to after school, and I would say, just from experience, each school can be really, really different, because there are some schools you show up 5 minutes after the bell rings and it's a ghost town, and others that it's really still a busy kind of place. I'm not familiar with Walnut's policy specifically, though I suspect they're urging students off campus relates to there's probably not a lot of folks available to supervise at that point. The student's day ends, and shortly thereafter the teacher's day ends, and the paraprofessionals that are maybe on campus, or security, or other adults who would be involved in supervision, their day ends really quickly after the end of the school day. And so again, not directly familiar with Walnut's policy, but I suspect what they're concerned about is having students on campus that are unsupervised, and being concerned about that, and that's why they would be emphasizing kids getting off campus as quickly as possible. I don't know if anybody else has anything.
The only thing I'd add is this came up at our full board meeting, actually, Kathy. So no, there is no policy expressly about end of day. So the student code of conduct would be that, which is certainly supported by a myriad of policies that we have. But just at our last board meeting, we were discussing this issue of how long folks are sticking around at the end of the school day. And honestly, again, maybe not the expert, but to me, the solve is it's couple-fold. There's obviously the supervision solve. And then there's also just the logistical solve with buses and what time they're there, and efficiency of kids getting on the buses. So I think the good news is that this did come up in a different way, not via policy, at our full board meeting. And I know that we're looking at it and want to make sure that, because a lot of stuff can happen, to your point, everyone's excited, emotions are high, end of the day, and things can go wrong. So I don't know, Mrs. Weinberg, if you have anything that you would like to add, but I would also encourage you, and I'm sure you're doing this, because if you're in the LCMC, you're already hyper involved. is working with the administration at Walnut on what their, because like Dan said, I don't know what their policy is either. And yeah, every school is different, for good or ill, ideally for good, right? Because they're trying to meet their needs. But I would lean on the administration there, and yeah.
Yeah, for what you just. I don't want to get myself in trouble or admit to anything, but I do have a student at Walnut who participates in a sport, and unfortunately she does have to stay after for a short time until her practice does begin. But I think they are aware of that, and there is a communication between whether the athletic director or the coach. But I do think that it's a great idea that you did bring that up, and hopefully if there's any issues or problems that are happening, that those are immediately resolved. I know when I do come up to the school around 4 p.m., there are a couple of kids still out on the back step area, but I have not seen a lot. So I'm not quite sure what the time frame is of when this is occurring. Is there a specific time frame?
That has not been communicated to us from the safety committee.
Okay.
I know that the time that the policy for Walnut is 3:15, that they want students kind of off property. And we discussed kind of a variety of reasons on why students might be hanging around. And we also discussed some pre-COVID programs that were in place at Walnut that were kind of supportive for after school, and due to various budgetary reasons are not kind of in place right now, and kind of potentially how to put those back in place via other funds. And so, but the question was put out on whether or not there was a policy that we needed to be following after school with expectation from, you know, the board and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And yeah, feel free to continue, you know, to keep us posted if we can be helpful. But again, I would definitely recommend working with the administration there, as we don't have that kind of policy. But thank you so much for bringing it to us.
Okay.
All
No,
right.
that's helpful. Thank you.
Have
Bye.
a good one.
You too.
All right. Well, now in closing, policy committee, we all did an awesome job this year. I think we've done a lot. The most notable, of course, as we approach Thanksgiving, things we're thankful for. I am once again very thankful for all the work we did with the bylaws. That was a big one. And so thanks y'all, general counsel, staff, everybody. Emily, thanks for coming to every single meeting. Derek Little, thanks for coming and let us ask you questions and bringing us the info. Rob, thanks for making sure everyone can see us and sound so good. Phyllis, thanks for literally keeping us from going off the rails every second of every day. We couldn't do it without you, and I know it's not easy. And to my colleague, Mrs. Weinberg, thank you for all the new things you brought to the table. You brought a lot of new stuff this year that we got to work on.
Thank you.
I'll do my best. All right, love y'all. And we're done.